Hello, this is Jerry Morton. Welcome to my podcast series titled Finding My Way, a memoir by Jerry Morton. This is podcast 67, titled The Work. Podcast 67, The Work, is an account of my work as a school psychologist during the 1969-1971 school year, serving 7 all-black inner-city schools being integrated for the first time. This was my first year as a school psychologist after serving 3 years in the Army. Everyone expects a school psychologist to test children. The teachers with no experience working with a school psychologist know that if you have a problem with a child and want help, you request that the school psychologist test the child. Now, there are a lot of things a school psychologist can do to assist a teacher. However, if you don't know what those things are, you can't ask for that assistance. Both years I worked with the St. Petersburg, Florida schools. I performed 150 psychoeducational evaluations for a total of 300 evaluations. However, I think my most significant contribution to my 7 black schools, their teachers, the students, and the school system that first year was in assisting teachers to implement a positive behavioral management program in their classrooms. I'd say the same thing for the second year, but for 2 other programs I became a part of. One of the first children for whom I performed a psychoeducational evaluation was in the elementary school that was overseen by a principal who had refused to meet with me. The child was about 4 years old. The teacher who made the referral wanted him evaluated to determine his suitability for a new experimental preschool program. The black child showed no hesitation in meeting with me. He was excited about my asking him questions and participating in the activities of the various tests presented to him. We laughed about my dropping some papers on the floor as he helped me pick them up. The child was clearly very bright. He was full of self-confidence and displayed a natural tendency to find joy in his interactions with me. Just as we finished a series of questions from the test, and I had praised him for how hard he had thought about his answers, his smile abruptly disappeared. "Hey," he began with a frown, "my daddy says I'm not to have nothing to do with no white honky. Are you a white honky?" That question caused me to pause. Calmly, but with an air of concern about me to match that of the child's, I said, "Well, I don't think I'm a white honky. What do you think?" He looked puzzled, as if I had just asked him one of the hardest questions from the test. Then his eyes brightened. A smile spread across his face as he responded, "Nah, you're no white honky." We laughed together and continued with the evaluation. So many of the elementary and junior high school students had learning and/or reading problems. There were no resources that the teachers or I were aware of for them to draw upon as they struggled to address these difficulties the children were having. The best I could do was to report the test results confirming the child had learning and/or reading problems. I could also provide clues concerning the student's learning style the areas of strength in the child's cognitive functioning to build upon, and the intellectual weaknesses to avoid emphasizing as they tried to help their struggling students. The way a child dealt with frustrations as he tried to perform challenging tasks was also helpful information to teachers. My 2 years as a graduate assistant to Dr. Edwards, director of the McGuffey Reading Center at Miami University of Ohio, had provided some basic understanding of remedial reading strategies. I passed those along to the teachers where it might be helpful. A key concept that Dr. Edwards had taught me was that a major problem for many poor readers in the upper grades was their conviction that they couldn't learn to read. Certainly, many other brain dysfunctions and the like played a role in the reading problems of many children. Unfortunately, too many children felt that they could not read, so they simply quit trying. Another point of emphasis Dr. Edwards often made was the importance of contextual clues in assisting children with their reading problems. In fairness to Dr. Edwards, I never took a course from him in reading or any other topic. He just made a point of talking to me about these topics during our many hours of personal conversation in the cramped office space we both occupied. The McGuffey Reading Center was being remodeled during my 2 years there. The office space we shared was so crowded that the backs of our desk chairs touched when we were both seated at our respective desks. Dr. Edwards was convinced that I was going to do a lot of public speaking. He took it upon himself to correct every grammar and articulation error I made when I made it, as well as putting a stop to any regional slang I would insert into my spoken vocabulary. Dr. Edwards provided me with a lot of personal stress during those 2 years, but he was right. The passage of time continues to teach me the value of Dr. Edwards' vision and assistance. Once teachers began reading my psychoeducational recommendations in my reports, many of the educators wanted to discuss some of the strategies they were planning to implement as a way of assisting the referred students. The overwhelming issue in the majority of the referrals was behavior. My recommendations included the use of positive reinforcement. I would often reference Dr. Charles Madison's RAID program: set rules, approve, ignore, and disapprove. The primary way most educators tried to control the problem child's behavior was through punishment. Using positive reinforcement as the major tool in shaping children's behavior was a major assault upon this belief system. Most teachers thought that they were naturally positive towards children most of the time. Over and over, the observations of those teachers did not support the belief that their evaluative statements to the children were more positive than negative. Quickly, I established a pattern of coaching some of the more responsive teachers in the RAID process. The first step was to observe the teacher as she taught a lesson to a class containing one or more disruptive children. Within 15 minutes or so, I'd picked up the teacher's basic pattern of responding to behaviors in the classroom with a focus on a specific child. It quickly became apparent that the problem child's behavior was often tied into the classroom management style of the teacher. Thus, the task of helping the teacher assist the child frequently involved developing a positive reinforcement plan for the teacher to use simultaneously with the target child or children and with the classroom. More and more, I became involved in assisting teachers with their classroom management skills. It became apparent that the implementation of a positive token economy system in the classroom was the key to engaging the children and following the rules. Verbal praise by itself worked for a few children, but it was not enough of an immediate reinforcer for a majority of the children. A token economy is simply providing something tangible to students as a reward, such as a check mark beside a student's name for following one of the rules. Once the child has accumulated a set number of check marks, he can cash in the check marks for a specific reward. Such rewards might include being the one to erase the chalkboard at the end of the day, taking messages to the central office, or receiving a paper turkey feather to place on your turkey drawing on the classroom bulletin board. Once the child's turkey had all its tail feathers on it, the child could select an item for all the children to have at the classroom's Thanksgiving Day party. The reward possibilities are endless. The consistent resistance to the use of token economies in the classroom was the concept that you were bribing the children to be good. They should be good just because they were supposed to be good. If children were not good, they should be punished until they became good. Well, that concept just was not working. Punishing children for bad behavior in the anticipation that they would automatically learn how to behave was a failed concept in my schools. Fortunately, there were plenty of teachers who wanted to focus on positive reinforcement. I stayed very busy helping them. As the success of various teachers in using the RAID process became known, I received an increase in the number of teachers wanting to learn about it. One young middle grade elementary teacher asked me to observe her class during the last part of the school day. She indicated that she was having management problems because the black teachers would not listen to her because she was white. I agreed to observe her classroom and make recommendations. Walking into her classroom was a shock. I had never seen such chaos in a classroom before, except in the movies. The noise level was astounding, as one little boy chased another around the back of the room and up an aisle of desk chairs as they both screamed with laughter. A couple of boys appeared to be fighting or wrestling in a corner. Several paper wads flew in wide, arching trajectories as if they were mortar shells flying in a combat zone. A group of girls had put their chairs in a circle and were chatting loudly with one another. Frantic activities were taking place in all sections of the classroom. It was all happening so fast, my mind couldn't register all of the details. By the far corner of the blackboard, 3 or 4 little girls sat in chairs pulled up close to the teacher as she was quietly explaining a grammar rule she had written on the chalkboard. The girls were leaning forward in their desks so they could hear what the teacher was saying. My eyes locked with the teacher's. She looked shell-shocked. Reaching into my pocket, grabbing a handful of change, I approached the one boy who happened to be sitting quietly in the middle row. Handing him a quarter, I said in a loud voice, "Here's a quarter. Thank you for being in your seat." With a surprised look, he gently accepted it. One of the boys throwing paper wads stopped in mid-swing of his arm and sat down staring at me. "Here's 15 cents for being in your seat," I clipped out in my best infantry lieutenant's voice. He smiled and took it. This caused heads to turn. 2 more students quickly slid into their seats. Maintaining my loud and commanding level of speaking, I approached them. "Here's a nickel for each of you. I like how quickly you returned to your seats. Once you got to them, you were paying attention. That's good. Thank you." At this point, I had everyone's attention. They were all returning to their seats and being quiet. I was down to a few nickels and dimes, plus some pennies. Finally, I was counting out pennies to give to the little girls surrounding the teachers. All of the children were in their seats, quietly smiling at me. "I'm sorry, I'm out of change. I would love to make sure each of you got a reward for being so good. Right now, this is one of the most pleasant classrooms I have ever been in." I continued walking up and down the rows of seated children, thanking each of them individually for their attention, for sitting straight in their chair, for looking towards the teacher to receive direction from her, and for any other behavior that showed support of good classroom order. Turning to the teacher, who seemed semi-frozen beside the blackboard, I stated, "What an outstanding class of bright, interested students you have. It must be so rewarding for you to be able to be their teacher." Blushing, the teacher said, "I want to be a good teacher for them. That's why I'm a teacher. School will be out in about 20 minutes. Can you come back so that we can discuss some ideas for my class?" "That would please me very much. I'd like to thank the class for demonstrating to me what considerate and caring children they are." With that, I waved goodbye to them as I was leaving the room. Several of the children made little hand waves back. As I walked into the teacher's empty room, she looked up from her papers at her desk and nodded for me to take a chair beside it. As we were greeting each other, her eyes filled with tears. Tears began gently rolling down her cheeks as she said, "I should resign. I'm a failure. Here you are, a complete stranger to my class, and in minutes you have them behaving like angels." At that, the tears freely flowed. No, you don't understand. I've had extensive training and experience in positive reinforcement, both in graduate school, the military, and in the school system. You can't be expected to know what I know. I could tell from your collecting the little girls around you who wanted to learn, and your quietly and calmly teaching them how dedicated and committed you are. I can help set up the classroom structure so that your students will be so well behaved and focused on learning that you will become a model for other professionals. Anyone as dedicated to teaching as you are can't help but be successful. About 4 weeks later, my prediction came true. The requests from teachers for assistance kept increasing. I asked the school administration for permission to videotape some of the more successful teachers using the RAID program. They made available the reel-to-reel video audio recorder, the tripod-mounted camera, and microphone. The equipment was bulky and heavy. The connecting cables had to be carefully placed around the equipment to keep anyone from tripping over them or knocking the equipment over. One of the central office's supervisors taught me how to set the device up and record with that. That was greatly appreciated. Mrs. Givens was one of the first volunteers to be videotaped. She taught one of the middle grades in the elementary school with the positively oriented principal. I thought that she was managing her classroom and relating to her children in an effective manner without the formal implementation of the RAID program. However, Mrs. Givens told me that there were always ways a teacher could improve to assist her children to learn. The RAID program looked promising to her. She was a natural in the use of the positive reinforcement strategies. Her husband was a guidance counselor at my junior high school. In my opinion, both of them were excellent educators. After TV taping Mrs. Givens in her outstanding use of the RAID strategies, I began using the TV tape as a tool in training other teachers. Several more teachers volunteered to be videotaped. Before long, I was using the TV tapes in school auditoriums, explaining the process to entire faculties during in-service days. Early in the second semester of the school year, 1969-70, a team of 2 remedial reading teachers at the junior high school asked to meet with me. I had been unaware that remedial reading teachers were available. Both of them were white teachers newly assigned to the school that year. I guess they were paid through some federal grant started as part of the systems integration program. I just didn't know and never asked about the history behind their being in that position. The teachers reported having attended one of my in-service presentations on the RAID program. They really didn't think it would be of any assistance to them with the specific collection of poor readers they were trying to help. At that point, they thought their efforts to assist the students was a lost cause. The students in this section had been identified as the worst of the poor readers in the school. Few had any reading skills beyond the early elementary level. The students were totally incapable of reading the textbooks in their regular classes. Not only were the students totally inadequate in their reading skills, they just didn't care about doing better. Few of them ever arrived to class on time. Several of them would simply walk out of the classroom before the bell had rung to change classes. Some of them would simply put their heads down on their desks and sleep. Others would engage in talking to nearby students or walk across the room to visit with a friend. The teachers had difficulty simply getting the students to open their lesson books. Each student had a specific plan that the reading teachers had devised for improving that student's reading skills. The teacher had prepared a folder for each student. The students were to keep a record of what had been accomplished in each of their reading assignments and what the reading material was about. Very few students made any entry into their folders. Those who had made entries into the notebooks had failed to follow the instructions correctly. For these reasons, the teachers felt that their primary role was to be babysitters during the hour the students were in their classroom. Well, this situation was a challenge. After reviewing the RAID program and the use of tokens as reinforcers for appropriate behavior, we brainstormed as to how we would set up the program. Students would be given a token for being seated at their desk at the time the class was to start. They would receive an additional token for having their individual folders opened at the correct spot when the class began. Another token would be given as one of the teachers checked to see if the student had correctly noted in their folder what item they had been reading the night before, whether it was a newspaper, a tin can label, anything with writing on it. A token would also be provided for working on their assigned classroom reading task until the teacher reached them to provide them with individual instruction. Every question asked by a student about anything related to reading would generate a token. The list was extensive. Determining what the students would want to cash their tokens in for produced a lot of disagreement. I didn't think several of the activities and items the teacher suggested would actually be things the students would want. The teachers insisted that the grand prize, the item that required the largest number of tokens to acquire, was for a student to be taken to the local bookstore to pick out a book that the teacher would buy and give to the student. I didn't think that was a good idea. The teachers would be spending a whole lot of their own money. It would be too expensive for them to carry out. I told them that I had no doubt the system would work, but the book buying reward was too costly. The teachers would not be able to afford it. That argument prompted a lot of laughter from the teachers. They knew the program was not going to work, so there wasn't a problem. Besides, they explained, if it worked, and the students actually improved their behavior and improved their reading skills, it would be worth whatever they would have to pay out of their own pockets. We reached a compromise on what the tokens would be cashed in for. They would ask the students in the class what they would like to spend their tokens on. The only compromise the teachers would make on their buying books for tokens proposal was the number of tokens it would take for a student to earn the right to have a book of their selection paid for. It was set at such a high level that the teacher speculated no student could ever earn that many. The students ended up reaching consensus among themselves and with the two teachers as to various ways they could use their tokens to obtain classroom privileges and do special activities. Being able to relocate in the classroom to spend time with a friend, providing assistance to some other student, being selected to deliver messages to the central office, being able to eat a snack in the classroom were just some of the rewards selected by the students. The price, the number of tokens for each one of these varied on the basis of how valued they were to the students. The price for the privilege of being taken to a bookstore and obtaining a book that the teachers had set was accepted. The program was implemented. Near the end of the school year, the teachers had spent hundreds of dollars buying books for their students. They were so excited about the success of their positive reinforcement system. When I suggested that they drop the reward of buying books for the next school year, the teachers refused. The teachers enthusiastically told me that it was worth every penny they spent to see their students becoming so excited about improvements in their reading skills, learning to love to read, and helping each other in gaining new skills. Working with the remedial reading teachers in the junior high school caused me to spend an increased amount of time there. When the students were all in their classrooms, the hallways were empty with just a few exceptions. I kept noticing this one student roaming the hallways. He seemed to always be there in the hallways. I asked the guidance counselors about him. He's a special case. Last year, we tried to get him into his classes. We just couldn't do it. he made those awful scenes, his parents would never respond to our request for a meeting. We investigated his background. It was bad. You just don't want to go there. In the end, he was just going to be out on the streets or in school in the hallways. He doesn't cause any trouble. He is happy there. We just decided this was the best option for him. Maybe you would like to see if you could do something for him. You need to contact his homeroom teacher. I tried to meet with the homeroom teacher. He never responded to my notes. The guidance counselor said they had asked the homeroom teacher to contact me about the student several times without success. While I felt guilty about not being more aggressive in trying to help the child, I also felt relief that I couldn't get to first base on this one. I had no idea as to what I could do that might be of help to the student. Besides, went my reasoning, I was not able to respond to all of the requests teachers made of me to assist in solving immediate problems that were confronting them right then. I could have been working 5 days a week at the junior high school and still not have had the time to meet with all of the requests for assistance. That fact was also true for all of my elementary schools. The needs of the children in my schools were so great and my time was so limited that a complaint from a small number of school psychologists irritated me. Their complaint was that it was unfair that they were assigned to serve 10 all-white schools while I was just serving 7 all-black schools. My outcry about the overwhelming needs of the black children compared to those all-white children coming from upper-income families in homes on Treasure Island's cluster of schools did nothing to change the opinion of the school psychologist serving 10 schools. What was so frustrating about their lack of understanding of the needs of the black community was that I valued those school psychologists. They were my confidants and my friends. They were talented, kind, and generous professionals. How could they be so unaware of the problems the black professional educators and I were confronted with day after day? How could they remain so unaware of what was right in front of them? Things would change. With that change came understanding.